Hello and welcome back to the Arch Book Podcast. As always, I'm Charlie Mercer and really excited to debut our latest podcast series, Architecture Spotlight, where I will be joined by former guest Michael Goldstein to discuss about what makes our New Zealand golf courses so special. Episode 1 is with Leo Barber, focusing on Paraparaumu Beach Golf Club, and really excited to explore what makes Paraparaumu Beach the spiritual home of New Zealand golf. All right, so Michael, Leo, great to have you both back on the pod. I think episode number 1 and episode number 3, or episode number 4 for going back to the first few episodes of the podcast in terms of you both as guests. But really looking forward to jumping into this. It's been a little bit of a brainchild of Michael and I's over the last few weeks, just trying to get some more architecture stuff out there, and no better course to start with than Paraparaumu Beach Golf Club, and no better extra guest than Leo Barber, basically Mr. Paraparaumu Beach himself. So really keen to sort of crack into it. But I guess just to sort of welcome you both, what does Paraparaumu Beach, sort of mean to you both in terms of where you see it fits in our golf landscape here in New Zealand?
Good to see you looking animated this time, Goldie. Hopefully, we're going to get a little bit more excitement out of you the last time you were on the pod. So I'm looking forward to that. Where does Paraparaumu Beach sit? And I guess I'm going to talk about it kind of later on. But I think it sits at the heart of New Zealand golf. I mean, we use this term, the spiritual home of New Zealand golf, and I guess we don't use that lightly. It's a golf course that's played a significant part in the development of the game here in New Zealand. It's hosted many of our prestigious events. It holds so many fond memories, I guess, for so many people during the era when golf was really taking off in New Zealand during the 60s and the 70s. So, look, I think it sits at the centre and rightly deserves its mantra of spiritual home in New Zealand golf.
Yeah, I've definitely drunk that Kool-Aid. I first heard Leo say the spiritual home, and it probably went over my head, to be honest. But there's no doubt that it is. It's where golf in New Zealand centres around. Really, like there's so much history. There's so many key people in the game that have got Paraparaumu deep in their bones, and it's the true links course of New Zealand, and it's probably our long-term shining light of architecture as well. So I think it's an apt place to start with these series, Charlie. And obviously having Leo is really special too, because, Paraparaumu Beach has only been around for 76 years, and Leo's worked there for a chunk of that, at least 20. Is that right, Leo?
Just less than that, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously he's no longer there, but he started as a superintendent, and his career kind of developed through that, and he became both the superintendent and the general manager, and he kind of transformed the place over a couple of decades. And, he's really kind of brought the mana back to Paraparaumu Beach, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But Leo's a really good friend of mine, and I met him the first time I played Paraparaumu in 2010. And most of the golf course, and certainly the architecture, went over my head. And certainly this chat about being the spiritual home, like that didn't really mean too much to me. But over the last 15, 20 years, I've got to know Leo, and like it's really special to have him here. I just had a birthday, and Leo spoke and came along, and he's kind of like the guy that carries the torch for Alex Russell at Paraparaumu Beach. And so, obviously on this series, we're going to talk to some architects, and we'll talk to some people with like amazing experience in golf course design. But I think for Alex Russell and certainly for Paraparaumu Beach, Leo's the torch carrier. So welcome, buddy. And it's good to have you here today.
Thanks, mate. Very kind words, and thank you. Yeah.
So you mentioned there, Michael, about Alex Russell. Obviously plays a tremendous part in the history of Paraparaumu. I guess, Leo, you've gotten to know a lot about Alex Russell and his life through many events through the years, the Alex Russell Society, and and some great courses in Australia as well that he's linked to, Royal Melbourne East, Yarra Yarra, Lake Karrinyup. What can you just tell the listeners about Alec Russell and what he kind of means to the history of Paraparaumu?
Yeah, thanks very much, Charlie. And it's interesting. It's golf course architecture is one of those kind of quirky things, right? And it's something that's gaining a lot more kind of prominence. And certainly when you're a custodian of a golf club, I think it's important to have a basic understanding of perhaps some of the design principles, and particularly ones that relate to your particular architect. And so I really set out to learn a little bit more about Alec Russell. Actually, learn a lot more about Alec Russell, and firstly by playing his work. I'd actually in a previous part of my career, I was fortunate to work at Royal Melbourne, and of course Alec Russell was heavily involved in the construction, along with Alistair McKenzie of the West Course, and then as a sole design credit on the East Course. So, but again, I was young then. I didn't quite know what I was looking at, and certainly as the years have gone on, I guess. Well, I hope to think that I've gained a little bit more appreciation of that. The Alec Russell Society, which you touched on there before, was something that we really kind of like a really fantastic initiative. There was a few interested parties from the different golf courses that Russell was associated with, kind of got together to collaborate with the society to I guess first and foremost, to create a little bit more awareness amongst the clubs that Russell was associated with. So to grow a deeper understanding, because there were some courses out there that were blowing up his work and desecrating some of this amazing stuff that dates right back into the 20s, with really little care or really appreciation of what they were actually doing. And so I guess the concept was to get these clubs together, not only at a greenkeeper level or a general management level, but at a committee level where these decisions are being made. And some of these decisions can happen so quickly in a boardroom, and you can wipe out significant years of genius design just with an over enthusiastic committee or something of the like. So we get together every 2 years at different courses. We introduce different subjects. Guest speakers talk on various things, and it's been really, really interesting to see how the clubs have embraced that, and some of them appreciating what they've got and holding on to what they've got, and other clubs that may have blown the stuff up in the past then setting about restoring some of that stuff. And Yarra Yarra is a great example right now, where they got Brian Slaughterkin from Renaissance Design and really put a lot of those features and characteristics and attributes that Russell put when he designed the place in the late 20s, I think it was. Really brought all that back and really cleaned the place up. So that's been really encouraging to see. Yeah.
Leo, what's Alec Russell's design history before Paraparaumu Beach? Which courses did he design?
Yeah, so he's credited with 5 courses. So he's credited with Paraparaumu Beach, obviously, Lake Karrinyup over in Western Australia, Yarra Yarra on the Melbourne Sandbelt, Royal Melbourne East, also on the Melbourne Sandbelt, and Riversdale, two certainly involved in the original stuff, and lost a little bit of that in subsequent years. So really the 5 courses, but through the society, we've discovered so many more courses that have either been lost. There's a course called Summerlands down at the bottom of Phillip Island that was lost. But other courses where he had heavy influence on, but not necessarily credited. And a lot of the stuff he did it pro bono. He did it off his own bat. He did it quietly. He was a consultant to so many courses throughout Australia, and there's a wonderful book, the Life and Times of Alec Russell, that Dr. John Green and I have just gone blank on his name, the gentleman from South Australia, put together, and there's a wonderful chapter in there about the other courses of Alec Russell. Yeah.
Are there any of those other courses that would surprise us? Or any of note?
With things like Peninsula Golf Club, he was heavily involved in that. Now that's obviously gone through a massive transformation, so none of that exists anymore. He was very close to Stanley Bruce, the Prime Minister of Australia. He designed a course up in Canberra, which no longer exists. But there's other ones that we're kind of discovering as we go, and I guess what we're trying to do from a society point of view is to bring some of those clubs in and bring some of that understanding. And the one that's coming up next year, we're introducing the Morecambes as a theme for that gathering. So the Morecambes were heavily involved in the Sandbelt at Kingston Heath and Victoria and Spring Valley, and we're trying to introduce more themes into it, more understanding, more education.
And obviously involved in the construction at Royal Melbourne as well, right? So through that nexus, obviously, Alec Russell learnt with Dr. Mackenzie. So can you tell us a bit more about that relationship and how that kind of came about? They obviously worked together on the West, and then Alec Russell's design philosophy, I'm guessing, was pretty strongly influenced by him.
Yes, I think so. So Alec Russell himself was a very good amateur golfer. He won the Australian Open in 1924. He was a member of might have been the Melbourne Golf Club then, but certainly later the Royal Melbourne Golf Club. So he was deeply involved into his golf. He was also an engineer, I believe, by education. Great sportsman. And so, yes, Mackenzie, when he was doing his world tour in 1926, famously came over to the Melbourne Sandbelt. He was in Australia, I think, for just not the Sandbelt, but he was in Australia for 5 weeks. In that time, he's credited with a number of courses from Kingston Heath, Royal Adelaide, New South Wales, I think Victoria. Well, maybe not Victoria, but anyway, certainly, and then Royal Melbourne. So, but he was only there for 5 weeks. So what he was very adept at, he did this later on in the US. When he linked with a guy like Bobby Jones at Augusta, Maxwell, I think it was, down at Cypress Point. He was very adept at engaging with the locals or getting someone on board that could actually carry out his plans when he jumped on the ship and moved on to the next place. So look, between during that period, he obviously saw something in Alec Russell that he liked, and in fact, I've got a reference on the wall at Paraparaumu Beach explicitly saying that he hadn't found anyone thus far that could carry out his plans so expertly as Alec Russell. So he clearly felt he felt a deep respect for Russell. He ended up going into a design partnership with Alec Russell. So there was Mackenzie and Russell Design Associates, and Russell was left behind with the head greenkeeper at the time, Mick Morecambe, to actually bring Mackenzie's plan and his routing and his genius, but to actually put it on the floor. So I think it's very easy at times, to credit the big name, but the guys that were left behind that actually built these places, did a massive. Deserved a massive accolade, yeah, for sure.
So then fast forward, and he comes out to Paraparaumu. What year did Alec Russell first come out to the Kapiti Coast?
Yeah, so golf was played at Paraparaumu from 1929. It was a rudimentary 9-hole golf course. It was extended to 18 holes in 1937. The Depression, and at that stage, it was a pay for play. It was Jack Hunt was the greenkeeper. His wife collected, 20 cents or a shilling or whatever it was in those days for a game of golf, and it was very simple. The depression hit hard, and the farmers that owned the place sold it. It was picked up by 5 Wellington businessmen who later on had a vision to turn this into a championship course capable of holding New Zealand's most prestigious events. And so they reached out to Sloane Morpeth, who was a New Zealander, very good golfer himself.
At Commonwealth Golf Club, right?
Yeah, at that stage was at Commonwealth Golf Club. He was also head of the Australian Golf Union. So,
Yep.
I don't know, Golf Australia as we'd know it today. They reached out to him and asked, well, I think they actually might have asked him to do the job, but he ended up recommending Alec Russell. And I've always said it, and I haven't been corrected yet, that I think Paraparaumu Beach in 1949 would be one of the last golf courses to be constructed by a Golden Age architect, because all those greats like Colt and Mackenzie, they'd all passed away in the 20s and 30s. So I don't believe there was anyone that was designing courses in the 20s and 30s that was still around in the late 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when he came over, right, like, how did the construction go? Like, did he live in Kapiti for a while, or?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think, again, I could be drawing a bow here, and you can always look at history a bit more romantically than what reality might have been. But it wouldn't have surprised me if he used this, or he took lessons from Mackenzie's visit to Melbourne and replicated it over here at Paraparaumu Beach. So he came across for 5 weeks. He lived with Stronach Patterson, who was the president of the golf club at that, the foundation president, and one of those 5 businessmen that had that vision. He took 3 or 4 of the good junior golfers of the day out with a 5-iron and got them hitting shots from various parts of the golf course. And whilst many of the playing corridors were there as we know them today, he certainly changed the routing. He introduced a couple of new holes, and he put bunkering in. He kicked greens onto angles, and he created what I like to think, I like to say, a lot of the genius. So they didn't have a lot of equipment back then to move earth, so there wasn't a lot of earth moved. It just came down to good routing and great use of good land. I mean, he must have loved that land when he jumped off the boat, and he saw what he was facing, and rippled, sandy soil, close to the ocean. I mean, it must have been an absolute dream for him. And in fact, I pulled one of the newspaper articles a year or two ago, and Russell's quoted, I think, in the Levin Chronicle as saying, like, if we did nothing to this golf course would still be considered a good golf course. But of course, his brief was to make it a great golf course, and that's what he set about doing.
So arguably going back to 1929 when the course was founded, they just picked a banging piece of dirt to build it on.
Yeah. I mean, hey, look, it's good land for golf, right? And as you know, when you get really good land for golf, often you just have to put a hole and a pin in the ground, and you're not too far off. So, yeah. I mean, the land's the land.
Did they need to buy any more land in 1949, or was that same footprint that we see now?
Yeah. So that parcel was part of. It was a parcel that actually went straight down to the beach, and sadly, I guess golf stayed in land, and all the good stuff, the coastal stuff was sold off as real estate. So it was part of a wider development, and out of those 5 businessmen, actually, as it got into the late 40s, 2 of them wanted to carve the golf course up into sections, and thankfully the 3 others had a vision. It was very amicable, and the 3 others pushed on with their plans to have a golf club, and they incorporated the club 1949, and that's the 75 years that we celebrated last year. So it's been quite enduring. Yeah, and I think a testament to their vision to create something that was capable of hosting big events in New Zealand.
So good. And before we kind of crank into, I guess, some of the more specifics of the course and its evolution and what it looks like more to present day and through your tenure, Leo, I'll just pull up. Goldie wrote a piece for golf.com back a couple of years ago in their Asia Pacific list, where I think Paraparaumu came in at number 17. But just a great write-up here, and it kind of encapsulates a lot of what we've already said about Alec Russell. But sort of quote, Alec Russell, the one-time design associate of Alistair Mackenzie, is an oft-overlooked actor with the top echelon of golf in Australasia. Russell's crowning glory was at Paraparaumu Beach, where in 1948, arguably drawing the curtain on the golden age of golf architecture, His life in golf culminated in creating one of the world's premier links. Though Paraparaumu Beach may lack the stunning vistas of the modern masterpieces of New Zealand golf, its routing is one for the purists. Where restraint balances against its epic, rumpled landforms, Paraparaumu is a seamless stroll through the dunes, which are perfect scale for walkable golf. While most reviews emphasise Paraparaumu's short holes, notably the 16th, in a deep but slender green, the real depth of strategic design comes from its diversity found in its two-shot holes, most notably the rumpled drivable 6th, the whimsical drive and pitch 8th, the rollicking 13th, and the strategic dogleg 17th. Once a bit overgrown and spongy, today's course soars under the strong custodianship. The trees are gone, allowing for the native wastelands to flourish, and the playing corridors are once again firm and bouncy. It's proper links golf of the highest order. So, yeah, I mean, great right up there, and kind of encapsulated much of what we sort of have already said and what we'll continue to say. But I guess...
I think I got a thank you from Leo's mum for that as well.
Oh, well, there you go. How good. But I guess in terms of talk there about Russell's work, in terms of the sort of layout of the course and its kind of routing, what differs today than when he first laid things out back in the late 40s?
Yeah, we're very lucky. When they were redoing the clubhouse back in the early 2000s, they discovered a whole lot of plans, and pictures and things that were sitting in a back room. And actually, it was Alan Mackay, the professional, and you've had him on your podcast as well, at the time, rescued them out of the dumpster. Now, there's some of Russell's courses would love to have those plans. We actually have those plans, and they're sitting up in the clubhouse today. And look, the course is pretty close to what it was in 1949. There's been two major changes, and they were brought about by boundary issues. So the ninth hole, which used to run straight up the boundary, so it used to the teeing ground to the left of the eighth green, and it would play straight up the boundary. The club went to court in 1970, I think it was, and by all accounts was doing quite famously in the case against a neighbour that had taken them to court, until the neighbour opened a suitcase full of hundreds of golf balls, and they spilled across the courtroom, and Paraparaumu Beach famously lost that court case. So that meant that the club had to come inland and put that internal out of bounds in, and the ninth hole now plays in a completely different feel, I guess, than what it did back then. And if you ever are a little bit cheeky and just head over to the left-hand side and tee it up over there, it just feels so much more comfortable. And the penalty for not getting your tee shot right, for fading your tee shot, is not going out of bounds and having to reload. It's being blind in the elephant's footprint, and there's quite a difficult shot out of there. So it just feels so much better and less kind of cramped and penal. The other major one was at the same.
I know that tee shot well, Leo.
Yeah, I do. I know you do.
I used to go there every time I played the course until I kind of matured and started worrying about liability. But
yeah.
I definitely recommend it if you're not worried about hooking it.
And then the other major one was down on 14, where the par 3 used to be the green site was positioned into the left corner, and they rerouted that or repositioned that further out to the right. And then I guess put that squeeze, that uncomfortable squeeze on, where you've got the 15th tees in there, you've got the 7th tees in there, you've got the 6th green. Like it's a lot going on in a very compact space. And again, if you go to the left of the 14th green now and you tee it up, you are actually hitting straight up through the saddle on 15. And again, that just looks and feels such a better shot. I have seen a very, very old photo of the 14th green. It looks wonderful out there in the corner. And in fact, I was very fortunate. I got to play with Sir Bob Charles before I finished up at Paraparaumu Beach. And he pointed out to me actually where the green was, and he said, and you could see that the shape of one of the old bunkers on the front right of the green. So I thought that was kind of pretty cool. So he remembers playing it there during the 60s. Yeah.
And
Do you think the club would ever? Sorry, do you think the club would ever consider purchasing the house in question on the 9th?
Probably not now.
No.
One of the members owns it, and all the rest of it. But look, we're just in a different sphere, right? If that was Augusta National, they probably would have been quietly buying up all the houses around the boundary over the last 25, 30 years. But alas, unfortunately, we've been selling bits and pieces off. Well, a little bit off anyway. Yeah. And then on that plan, the 2 holes that weren't built, not 2 holes, 1.5 holes. The 12th hole was designed to be called a channel hole, so to give you an option to play straight down the channel, very similar to where the routing is now, or to play up to the 17th fairway, the lower fairway, and create a genuine 3-shot safe option out there. So for whatever reason, that was never constructed. I think it might have been, again, a little bit cramped with 17 fairway and 12 playing out towards there. But having walked it with designers and in the last 10 years with modern earth moving equipment, you could kind of pick those dunes up and create a little bit more space out to do that hole, which I think would be pretty neat. And the other half hole was just the position of the tee on the 5th. The original routing has that tee very high up above the shelter there, and where the toilet is now. So you'd be playing into it would be quite a it'd be quite a snappy little hole from up there. So who knows? The club may at some stage do one or both, or certainly I think that tee on 5. I'd love to have done that before I left, but that's certainly very, very doable. And it could be just that kind of 1 in 10 tee where you just head up and you play the Russell tee for something special.
And you did a lot of stuff before you left, Leo. And I go back to 2002 when the world watched Paraparaumu Beach on TV with Tiger there, and the greens were spongy and it was pretty green. There was a lot of trees around. Do you want to just talk us through the evolution of the course over the last 20 years and how that's impacted the design?
Yeah, I guess very tough at that time. It was horrific weather leading into that event, and I guess a number of things that if it had been good weather, you probably would have got away with all that stuff. Kind of really came home and hit the club quite hard. When it really rained, not only in the month leading up, but on several of those days throughout there. So look, like a lot of clubs, it's gone through its evolution, and probably fair to say that 2002, where it should have been our high point, hosting the number 1 golfer in the world, was probably a little bit of a low point for the club, and it kind of coincided with some other poor decisions that went in around capital expenditure, and the club got themselves into a little bit of a fix, I guess. So that was a little bit of a shame, but also through the these were just fads, right, that went on during the 70s and 80s or 80s and 90s as kind of golf got exposure and green became good. So if your course wasn't green, you probably weren't being a good greenkeeper. We had a lot of fancy fertilizers come on, automatic irrigation systems went in. So there was a lot of kind of a lot of temptation came into greenkeeping, into golf, and same with planting. There was this whole beautification push where now I just think we have a lot more understanding around some of that stuff, and it's just gone full circle where natural dunes are seen as something that's ecologically very important and worth preserving, and if you're going to go plant out there, you're not just going to plant trees that were given to you by a generous nurseryman. You're going to go and find what's indigenous to those dunes, and you're going to try and bulk that up. So there's just look, there's a lot more education, not just only in golf, but we can see it in our in our dock preserves and other aspects of things that we're doing in our lives. So yeah, look, there was the place had become quite choked with trees. Tree removal started, I believe, in the late 90s, and certainly during my time, we just ticked it over. There was no and this was, again, just my philosophy. If we get there in 1 year, or we get there in 5 years, or we get there in 20 years, it was at least it was a case of taking small steps, but taking small steps together in the right direction, and making sure the club came with us, and doing it slowly. I think gave an opportunity to just create and build that education around some of these philosophies, and firm surfaces. So firm surfaces has been really important to Russell's design. So if he's essentially putting a golf hole in there that's going to favour a shot from one side of the fairway as opposed to the other, then it's really important that you have a firm green that's going to either receive a ball or deflect a ball to reward the placement of that tee shot. So all those things were kind of quite important. Short grass, again, the whole, maybe the PGA Tour type of disease that kind of gripped us all was fairways had to be narrow and grass had to be long. And over the years we've just cut a lot of that back, and now you'll see on all the modern courses, and certainly if you play in New Zealand, Kidnappers or TRI, Jack's Point, you'll see these massively wide fairways that just assist a lot more kind of strategic interest, make them a lot more playable, and yes, they might look wide initially, but they almost kind of lull you into a false sense of security, because you get out to one of the wide areas of the fairway, and yes, you might be on short grass, but you're not in the position that the designer created that green for. So yeah,
that's great stuff. And I mean, we've talked about a lot of the history and a lot of the changes, but at its essence, we'll try and explore what makes it so good as a golf course. We try not to get too hung up on rankings, but I think it's on the latest top 100 New Zealand rankings. It's in second place behind Taraiti, and it's globally gone up a few spots to, I believe, 91st, which is pretty remarkable considering how many courses there are. And I know that, Leo, you and I talked about after our first podcast together and probably $1 million less in terms of its maintenance budget than anything else on those lists, and then some.
I think so. I think we would be, $1 million shy of probably the next the next one on the list, for sure.
Which I imagine is probably Barnbougle Dunes, if I was looking through
probably right.
Michael, really keen to get your kind of thoughts on it. Obviously, you're tremendously well travelled and got a great sort of golfing brain for golf course architecture. But from your standpoint, what is it that sort of you relate to so well with it?
Yeah, look, there's so many things that make Paraparaumu great to me, but I think one thing that I really rate in golf courses, and you'll hear it from me a bit over this series, is the routing. And like my personal preference, and I think this is like the essence of golf, is that a course should flow, it should be easily walked, and it should be sustainable. Like there's no point in having excess land. It just costs everybody money, and it costs input, and it's ultimately not good for the game. Paraparaumu must be less than 50 hectares. Is that right,
50,
Leo?
Yeah, it's 50 hectares, 120 acres, yeah.
It's a super compact site, and the routing is just simple. Like the first time you play it, you don't think too much of it, but the more you play it, you realize that the routing's quite genius. And part of that was before Alec Russell. But I think that the part that really makes it sing to me is that a lot of the golf courses north-south routed, and it blows hooly there, and you're playing into the wind and it's tricky, but you've got these really cool holes that connect the golf course up and make it all work. And those holes are some that are kind of the most famous, right? Like the 6th hole, which is the short par 4 with the rumpled fairway, and then the 9th, which I sometimes play it the normal way, which is from the west to the east. And then on the back 9, you've got 13, which is the really famous, hole that climbs towards the Tararuas. And then you've got 14 and 15 as well that play in that east-west direction. And those holes, to me, just kind of break up the routing. They give it a little bit more kind of variety. And they kind of, I don't know, they really kind of make it to me. What do you think, Leo, about the routing?
Yeah, I guess that it also it gives you a little bit, and then it takes a little bit away, right? So you start off and you're punching down into the nor'wester, but then you turn around onto the fourth tee, and all of a sudden the northwest is your friend, and it gives you some relief. But then you turn back into 5, and it gets you again. You turn away, so I like it as opposed to say those very traditional routings over in the UK and Ireland, where you could punch out for 9 holes and come home, or typically they would they would help you on the way out and they would hurt you on the way in. So I like the way it bounces around, and I think I think it has really good rhythm as well. So you can have a really tough section, and then you can kind of get to the 6th and the 7th, and the 8th, which kind of give you a little bit of respite back. But it's interesting. It's one of those courses that as soon as you get kind of too cute on yourself and you get quite proud of your efforts through the first 5, next thing 6, 7, 8, kind of 9 bites you in the backside. So it's a course that you can never kind of relax on. If that you can't relax over a shot, because a miss hit at Paraparaumu Beach tends to kind of hurt you more than a lot of the stock standard places we have in New Zealand, where you might just have a flat piece of ground and a bunker left and a bunker right, and trees, and just hit it down the middle. So I really like that. I mean, I guess one of our you talk about being quite economical with land. I guess if anything, I would love to have a little bit more room down the boundaries, so that we didn't have to have that problem on 9 or 10, 11, 12, which are all hard up to the houses. Can you imagine if the 11th on the left-hand side looked like it does on the right-hand side? It would be absolutely, and it is a stunning hole, but just aesthetically, the way it just runs into the houses just kind of takes away a bit from that. So, yeah.
I think though that like the scale of the place is probably what makes it really work for me. And I didn't get this the first time I played it. It just didn't really mean much to me. But when I got back from playing for a year, and I'd played in Scotland for 50 days and played in Ireland for a month, and you see these sand dunes around the world, and in Ireland they're massive, and you kind of play through them. It's slightly claustrophobic sometimes. In Scotland they're pretty subtle. And Paraparaumu is kind of in the middle. Like, it's definitely more towards the Scottish side, but the scale of them, and I didn't really register this until I was chatting with Scott McPherson after my year of golf, and he said to me something that I'll never forget, and that was, and Scott grew up in this part of New Zealand and has become a really well-respected golf designer who lives in Edinburgh now, but he said Paraparaumu's beach it's got perfect scale for golf. And when he said that, it was like a penny dropped, because it was like the size of the sand dunes is enough to kind of, at times you feel like you're sheltered by them, and then the next time you can play over them, and then you can play kind of into it a little bit, and it never feels like you're hiking up and down hills, and you get all the benefits of these sand dunes without feeling trapped by them or claustrophobic or the routing's impeded. And that's where, to me, those holes like 6 and certainly 14 and 15 that play over the dunes or from high on the dunes, it kind of like comes back to that scale piece, because you just can't do that on big dunes like you see in other parts of the world.
See, what had happened, Michael, with this overplanting craze and a lot of the self-seeding that went on out there, is that it actually did kind of claustrophobe everything up, and it made it very claustrophobic, and it did take away from these wonderful dunes. And yes, a small property, as we've alluded to, but once we took the trees down, and this was an unintended consequence, to be fair, like we were just trying to expose the dunes and assist the health of the grass, and the shading and all that kind of stuff, and the strategic, making sure that trees didn't have a strategic intent. All of a sudden, we opened up the Tararuru Ranges, we opened up Kapiti Island, we opened up down to Pukera Bay, we opened up north to Otaki, and it made it a heck of a lot more spacious. And I think the ambience of that place really lifted, where, at one stage you were standing on 6 and you were looking at the public building down at the end there, the old school, and you had pine trees on the left and all that. Well, now your eye just goes 180 degrees, and that whole tee shot just feels so much better. Yeah.
The other thing about like the site, and is so lucky, Russell, to build a golf course here, but it's just the natural landforms, which we've touched on. But in the fairways is where it's like really pertinent, because they just have this rumple to them, which you can't really create. And I can count on more than one hand the number of shapers I've talked to about these fairways, and they try and recreate this kind of natural feel at modern links. And it's bloody hard, right? Because these shapes are just purely natural. And Leo, I think last time we were out there, you talked about it as well, right? On the third fairway.
Even this was on the fourth fairway. This might be the same story or not, but I remember walking out there with Riley Johns and the other shaper for Core Crenshaw. They'd just come down from completing the South course at TRI.
John Hawker or
John Hawker. Yep. So John Hawker, and the two of them were just having this quiet conversation over the side, and I actually thought they were kind of being quite critical of certain aspect. And I said, look, if you don't mind me asking, like, what are you two guys discussing? And they said, you just can't get those shapes with an excavator. You just physically can't do it. And those two are considered, some of the best shapers in the world. And they were just fascinated by just how natural, and they were really looking at those shapes on the fairways and just how, just what nature had created.
And like the geeks know this, but the maybe semi-geeks probably don't. But this whole modern kind of wave of architecture was described as minimalism, right, Leo? And fundamentally that means that the designers touch the land as little as possible, keep it as natural as possible, and that means that your lies are just infinitely variable, and it mostly resembles nature. And Paraparaumu has that in spades, right? Because obviously, as you mentioned, Leo, they didn't have the equipment back in the 40s or earlier to flatten the fairways. There weren't trees growing to pull out, so they never messed it up. Yeah. And we're kind of blessed that it's still just sitting there as this perfectly minimalistic piece of golfing land.
100%. And so many great insights there about the routing, but to make a golf course great, I guess not only the routing has to be great, but the holes have got to be pretty damn good as well. And there's certainly plenty of good ones to choose from out at Paraparaumu. Just like to get both of your sort of personal favorites out there. Leo, I guess we'll start with you. Obviously, so many to choose from, and I remember chatting with you a bit about this on our very first pod. But what are some of the ones that you hold dear to yourself in terms of holes out there?
My favourite hole is the 8th hole. All right, and I used to drive past it every morning when drive it into the shed, and I don't know if that clouds my judgment, but I remember very early on I walked the course with our consulting architect at the time, Greg Turner, and he introduced a concept to me that I hadn't heard before, and it just makes complete sense, and I think about it every time I walk to that tee, and I introduce that hole to my playing partners. The line of charm and the line of instinct. So when you stand on the 8th tee and you're looking at the green, your instinct is just to go straight at it, all right? But you don't realise until you get up there that all of a sudden you're down onto the right-hand side. You've got the smallest green on the course. You've got to come over a bunker. You've got to somehow hold a firm green. And you realise, like, Russell 1, Leo Barber 0, And then you've got the line of charm out to the left-hand side, where you play out to the left, and all of a sudden this little green opens up, and the bunkers, go left and right, and it presents itself. So really clever, and there's so many holes, probably similar throughout New Zealand, where you just see a bunch of pine trees dumped on that corner, all right, to go make you play out to one particular spot, and so effectively the 8th hole is a dog leg. But it's not a restrictive dog leg. And if you do go down the right-hand side, which I'm a bit of a fader / slicer, and you find yourself down there, that 1 in 10 time when you pop the ball up and you hold on the green, I tell you, that is a shot that you remember for weeks afterwards. So I think it's a very clever hole for a hole that's about 300 and a little devil, for something that's 340 metres long.
Yeah, and it's similar to the 10th, really, right? Like the 10th is a straight short par 4, drivable if you've got a smoke your driver and you're a great golfer. But for an average golfer, it's kind of a dog leg too. You need to go as far left as possible on the fairway, open up the angle, and if you hit a wedge
Right.
from the far left of that fairway, it's simple as pie. But if you're coming in from the right, you're coming in blind over a bunker. It's all working away from you. And firm
Absolutely.
green.
So to get out to the left, what do you have to take on? You have to take on the creek that runs along there and the danger. But your reward is exactly as you said. You avoid that big bunker on the right, and you kind of open the green up. Yeah,
Maybe one of the more uglier great holes in New Zealand, but it's certainly one of the great holes.
Well, again, because it's got some, it's got some pretty average architecture sitting up the left hand side there, and it just kind of takes it away. But yeah.
I think what's so great about both those holes, especially how the course is sort of playing in the present day, is when the conditions are firm. Like you did such a great job over your time at the club to keep things pretty firm and fast. I mean, last time I played out there was in August. Took some photos and chucked them up on Instagram that day. But how firm it was playing, and we've not had a great winter. Certainly not a good spring here in Wellington. But like what you say, the challenge of, if you take the 8th hole, for example, being able to pull that shot off over the bunker, I'm still convinced that if you've got a 3/4 shot over that bunker, it must be near on impossible unless you're hitting the ultimate flop shot to hold that green at all. Because, I mean, I've played Waikanae Cup there the last 5 seasons, seen plenty of guys, me included, hit it into the right rough. And I think I've only seen one guy ever hold that green. And these are all guys on 5 handicap and less. So decent enough golfers. So, and then the 10th as well. I remember that little back shelf on the back left of 10 always kind of gets me when they do chuck the pin all the way back there.
Yeah.
And it's actually a deceptively long green. And I think when Tiger played there, I can't remember which round it was, but he had a massive misread
It was
on that.
First round, I think. It was in Sunshine.
Yeah.
I think it was on the Thursday. He teed off the back 9. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember him having a hard time, like he did on several of our greens. And
again, I was kind of surprised there that he wasn't pulled back. I can't believe he even flirted with that, with that back left, because all the locals will know if you flirt back there, you'll lose it off the back left. And Tiger's pretty handy with his wedges.
Again, there was a big tree behind that green until
massive tree, yeah.
And now that's gone, and that whole deception of the length of the green, Charlie, becomes apparent. Whereas before there was a tree, it was just way more straightforward.
Yeah. And I guess, for both of you, I mean, touching on 8 and 10 there, so many other great holes. Any other ones that you want to give a mention to?
Well, I think the best hole on the whole property is the 17th. Strategically, it's regarded as the top half dozen holes in Australasia. I mean, it is. I even heard Mike Clayton famously say once that he thought it could even be better than 6 West at Royal Melbourne. So that's pretty high praise indeed. But it just encapsulates on one hole. It encapsulates the genius of Russell. He took 2 holes from 1929, 1937 routing, and he created one hole out of the 2 of them. So you've got the lower fairway and the upper fairway. You both used to be separate holes running in opposite directions, and you have this green site that presents itself if you're brave enough to get up and you're capable of getting up onto the top tier. You get to go down the throat of the green. But if you're not, you're taking the shorter way, the lower fairway. You're now faced coming over a bunker, and of course you've got the Valley of Despair that awaits you over the back. And I think, like Paraparaumu in general, is that it's a repeat play. The first time that I take guests to that hole and I talk about just what an amazing hole it is, they're kind of looking at it and they can't figure it out. They don't know where do we go, what's our line. Like, it's not there apparent. But when you walk off and you having skirted the Valley of Despair or whatever, and you just go, I just want to go back to the tee and play this again. I get this now. And it, again, it's another example of, depending on what the wind's doing, if you're playing into a southerly, if you've got the nor'wester, are you taking the lower fairway, are you taking the upper fairway? And yes, technology is kind of, for the very best player, has taken a bit of that kind of strategy away. But it's a wonderful hole. And I say that because Greg Turner, on that same time that I walked with him in those early weeks, he said his play was always down the lower fairway. He would then play a wood short left of the green, and he'd chip on. He just wanted 4 every time. He was happy with his 4. So for a bogey golfer like me, I'm happy with 5 every time I can escape that hole. Yep.
And it kind of comes back to the angles, right, Leo? Like the angle of that green is, at least 45 degrees from the fundamental line of play. And that's typical of Paraparaumu. And I think the way that you've got the golf course playing with your team over the last 20 years, it's so firm, it just kind of accentuates those angles and the importance of coming into those greens from the right sides of the fairway.
Well, it's absolutely true. We haven't touched on this yet, but also, short grass and shaving the banks around the greens. And so 17 is another great example of that, is that the long grass basically kind of came up within a mower width of the green. So if you're coming off the lower fairway and you watch your ball dip off heading towards the valley, well, it would lodge itself in the rough, 3 feet, 4 feet, and then you're basically faced. So one, you haven't been punished for being out of position. 2, you now only have one option, and that's just a fluffy kind of wedge up onto the green, and it just dulls the whole strategic intent of Russell's down straight away. Whereas, if you go over short and you lose it over the Valley of Despair, well, you might putt it up, you might use a little rescue club up, you might kind of punch a 7-iron into the thing and pop it up, you might flop it up. Like you've now got 4 or 5 different options, and I love seeing better players kind of like agonising over that. And we've held a lot of stroke players and New Zealand amateur events, and when these young kids that have only ever known the flop shot come to Paraparaumu, it's you need a few more kind of tools in your bag than just that, and that might not necessarily be your go-to in those situations,
as Frank Nobilo found out on the 5th hole that time, right, Leo?
Yeah, 5th hole.
Yep. Make triple from down the left. But like for those who haven't been to Paraparaumu, these drop-offs are, they are significant. They must be 5-6 meters, 4, 5, 6 meters high.
Yeah, probably around the 5th for sure.
Simple roll-up. So I always remember one of the local kind of great players showing me how to play these shots, and I would think either to hit a high shot or to hit one along the ground with a 6-iron or a 3-wood or a putter.
Yeah.
But he got his wedge and smoked it pretty hard into the bank, but hard enough so it just popped up and just dribbled onto the green.
Yeah.
And he played there so many times. That's what he did. And it worked for him, but it was a shot that's bloody hard to execute.
Yeah.
It's also with those runoffs. The depth perception. Like you can be down the bottom on 5 and even over the back of 17, and you can't even see the top of the flag. So for a player if number one, even good players, it's like just try and get it anywhere and just keep it on the dance floor. But even knowing the rough direction where you're going, it can be quite disorientating in terms of where am I, and then you're trying to hit this shot, and then you've got to be very committed to what you're doing. Whether, like what you say, if you are going to take a wedge and even go low, like bash it into the bank, but how much spin do you want to try and put on it? And it's all endlessly an equation that you've got to try and kind of balance. So it's good stuff.
And it's interesting, right? We're talking about short grass, but it's not bunkers. It's not it's not water. It's not you think of all the nasty things can come up and bite you. I mean, this is just using the land as as another dimension.
I think we've managed to get 53 minutes into this pod, and we haven't talked about the par threes at Paraparaumu Beach, which, like most gigs, right? You kind of say this is a great golf course, and they say, oh, it's got some of the best par threes in the world. And I think I'm a bit like you, Leo. When I think of my favourite holes, it's those kind of short par fours or the drive and pitch 8th, which kind of press my buttons. But it's pretty hard to not talk about the par threes, right? Like as a set, they're exceptional. And I think Tiger, is that right? Tiger made some kind of quote about them, Leo?
Yeah, comment. I tried to get some words out of, he didn't have a particularly happy week at Paraparaumu, but I tried to get some words out of Steve Williams, and he just said, look, Tiger he was enamoured by the par three, said his best set of par threes he'd kind of played. So that went straight to the website. Yeah.
But like for me, the 16th is one of my favourite holes in the world, and it was one of my first insights into golf architecture too, from Phil Tauranga, who, he kind of was giving me some crumbs to try and get me interested in golf architecture. And he said to me something like, that 16th hole at Paraparaumu Beach, like you could build that almost anywhere, and it's just one dune, and you're hitting from one dune to the next, and the green's just kind of ledged into the sand dune there, and it's got the drop off on the right, the sand dune on the left, and it's kind of got infinite options there in terms of you can put the pin on the front, you can put the middle, you can put it in the back. It's like an hourglass green for those who haven't seen it, but.
And Goldie, at the end of the day, it's 126 metres, all right? It should be nothing frightening about a 126 metre hole. Yet, it sits in the top half of the stroke index. It's an incredibly difficult hole, and it just comes at a time in the round where it can make and break. I mean, I've experienced both emotions in matches and stroke play and things like that, but it's such a pivotal. I mean, that flow home 15, 16, 17, a 3. Really, really pivotal holes. And I talked about earlier about the rhythm of the course. Well, yeah, you're back into it. You have a little, respite at the 14th, and then bang, 15, 16, 17 kind of, are you shooting a good score today, or are you siding for something a little higher? So
it's also like the beauty of links golf, right? Because it's so simple, but the wind could be doing anything. Like we all know, you've hit 4-iron there, and you've had to try and sting it under the wind, and the next minute it's howling from behind you, and you're trying to keep it on the green. And when you add the firm greens, you add a bit of breeze, and a green like that's skinny and kind of deceptive. Is
it no accident that Steve Williams turned out to be one of the greatest caddies in the world? He started caddying as a kid at Paraparaumu Beach, and he learnt with his eyes. And in fact, he got, he wouldn't mind me saying, he got probably frustrated in later years with all this kind of aim points and flip charts and all that business, because he was the best at at judging with his eyes. And I'll always say, again, taking a guess there, they'll say, what's the distance? And I said, forget the distance. Come and stand on the tee, and actually, what does it feel like to you? Because 126 metres, as you know, could be a 5-iron or a sandwich. And if you're just going to judge it off a distance, you're going to be, yeah.
I think the other genius with the 16th is some people think they see that it's benched into the side of that dune, and they think, oh, well, I can it's easy. I can just kind of use the dune on the left and feed it onto the green. But then naturally, if you're going to sort of slightly smother a short iron, it goes longer. That bank does not just carry itself all the way down the green. It's only kind of there actually usable in the midsection. So you see so many people, and I think Tiger twice when he played, or even 3 times, end up over the back left, thinking you can use the bank. And, it's not an easy shot, especially now with shorter grass around the greens. And the green itself has got quite a subtle sort of not quite shelf, but spine that is really interesting when you're watching good players trying to sort of read it. So it's
that invisible spine, right? And again,
yeah.
Tiger, I can't remember one of the rounds. I think it might have been the 3rd round where he had that putt coming down the spine, and he missed the pin about 3 foot to the right hand side, and he almost picked his putter up like he was going to drive it into the green, like blaming the green. So no, that's not the green. You don't miss by 3 feet because of the green. Like, you've just completely misread that. And I don't think he probably believed that there was that much break.
No, it is deceptive. It's such a good hole. And going back to Inter Club, a few years ago, 2 guys in the group in front of me halved it with 9s. So yeah, single figure handicappers. So that was pretty hilarious.
Yep. Goldie, what do you think about the par 5s?
Well, I think, obviously, when you talk about weaknesses of Paraparaumu Beach, this is something that's discussed. And it's great that you mentioned the 12th, because, you can kind of tell when you play that hole that it's not in keeping with the rest. It doesn't have the same essence to it in terms of angles and lines of play. And I think, personally, that the channel hole that was envisaged by Alec Russell would be great to become a reality there. And I think, that would be one of the key weaknesses of the course, which I think could be fixed. And we both know that was the original intention, and when perhaps one day that will happen. So
And,
that's one of the par fives.
yeah, and I mean, we talk about this amazing land, but the 12th is probably the least interesting because it plays over the least interesting land as well, right? It's nothing. It's yeah.
I think the seventh is a really great hole, and I've just got back from Melbourne, and there's a lot of par fives there that these days are par fours as well, right? But that doesn't really matter. It's just a number on a scorecard. If it requires good shots and it's got good angles, then who cares if it's an easy par five? And I think 7 fits that mold. I think 7's got fantastic land, great landforms. The angles work beautifully. It really, the green really accepts a low running shot well. I think the more recent work from the greens crew to extend the green, just the back there is fantastic as well. It brings that back left bunker into play.
Yeah.
So nothing but positive things to say about 7. And look, 18 is obviously one of the holes that is a little funky too. Like it's got an internal out of bounds there, and I don't know. What do you think about 18, Leo?
Well, so because the criticism of the fives is they're all, they're too short, all right? And I've read in Russell's notes that he designed them as deliberately, 4.5s. And that was a bit of a thing I gather from some of the designers back in the day to kind of almost give some relief back and give the option of a birdie or not, all right? And so 18, it's effectively a par 4 for the better players, all right, under competition. So par's not going to be enough when you come into that hole. You're going to need a 4, as you saw in 2000 with Michael Campbell and Craig Perks in the playoff. One of those guys had to have a 3, which Campbell did second time round. So it's produced, and I've seen so many dramatic finishes, and yep, it has got that quirky internal out of bounds, which again I've seen. I think it might have been Ryan Fox in the 2008 stroke play go out of bounds on there. There was a 3-way playoff with him, Jared Pender, and James Betts, who's now at Royal Auckland as the director of golf. And Betsy actually triumphed over the two of them. The two of them ended up picking up their balls. So, yep, it's short, but it produces dramatic finishes, and it can, again, it's another one. If you relax on that tee shot, you might find yourself, walking in like Foxy.
I think that whole par thing is definitely overrated. I just got back from St Andrews Beach, and Tom Doak obviously really rates that as one of his better designs, and a lot of people do. And that place has only got 2 par 5s, but then it's got a number of par 4s, which they're seriously hard. The 13th hole at St Andrews Beach is 455 meters off the back tees, and
over a hill as well, right? Over a dune or something.
Hills, and there's no roll, and you're going kind of like crazy, and it's just a mental thing. Like you change the number on that hole to a par 5, and everybody would kind of go ho hum, and not ho hum, but it just have a different mentality. And I think that it's just a number at the end of the day. If it's a good golf hole, it's a good golf hole, and I personally like the 13th at St Andrews Beach. It's got a roller king fairway, and it's super cool. And I think it's kind of the same at Paraparaumu, certainly with number 7, and I think 18 as well if you get the fairway a bit straighter.
It would be nice to be able to create something down the right-hand side that wasn't an internal out of bounds, but discouraged people from going down there, right? And same on the 9th. I've spoken to people on the 9th. You could, hey, there's a bit of work, and this is kind of just spitballing stuff here, but you could take the green over to the creek and shape it in such a manner that if you're coming off the first fairway, you're never holding that green, all right? You can take it out. But, of course, there's safety issues with both. You don't want anyone hitting down the first, and you don't want anyone hitting down the practice fairway. But that's not to say that an internal out of bounds prevents that from ever happening, right? Yeah.
I think we're wading into dangerous territory here, Leo, becoming golf architects, which we are not.
Exactly.
No, and like what you say, having the restrictive boundary, I mean, I remember talking to you about the 9th, the very first time that we spoke, and we did, or something like, angling the green, even where it exists now, just to the point where if you are coming in off the right, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to actually get up and down. But it's kind of, there's no perfect answer really with both those internal OBs, and they've kind of come back into fashion, I feel like, a little bit in some of the the circles in the last couple of years. I think like when I first really started reading about golf course architecture, like even the ones at Hoylake, people were really out on them. But when the Open came back there most recently, some people thought it was kind of, there's a bit of quirk there with the internal OBs because you don't see it everywhere.
Look, I guess the danger is when you start kind of talking like we've just been talking the last couple of minutes. Is that hey, these are very good golf holes, all right?
And exactly.
And we don't want to be encouraging any committee members or armchair enthusiasts to start debating this around the bar. Yeah.
And in terms of moving forwards for the club, and I know you've spent some time with Tom Aldridge, who's the new superintendent, who's taken over obviously your position in terms of the superintendent side of things. He's done some pretty great work already. Obviously, having picked the club up in a very good place and sort of keeping the vision going, but just some stuff I've seen recently, some work on 2T, I believe. And also getting rid of some of the trees out the back of 12 green. Some of the photos I've seen there look really good, but I know it must be probably quite, obviously when you leave a place, you're not keeping a sort of super close eye on it. But what do you think about some of those changes that you've seen made? Obviously, you still remain a member there, and seeing things continue in the same kind of vein that probably you would have done if you were still there.
Yeah, hey, look, Tom Aldridge, he was a fantastic selection by the club. He's an incredibly mature guy for someone. He's just had his 24th birthday, I think, today. Happy birthday, Tom. So he's a young guy. I've got to keep remembering he's a young guy because he's just so wise and so mature, and he is he's been greenkeeping since he's 15. So in terms of greenkeeping age, he's been on the tools there for 9 years, but he's just a big sponge. He's soaked it up really quickly. He gets it, and you're only a custodian for a short period of time, effectively in terms of the what we hope is the longevity of the club and the course. And so it is your responsibility to at some stage you've got to pass that jersey on and let someone else kind of have the go. And I guess the aim when you go into these things is this is the whole All Black adage, right? You leave the jersey in a better place. So I'm delighted that Tom's wearing the jersey now, and he's great. We talk, well, probably daily, to be fair, and not in that kind of an overbearing way, just as a mate and a mentor and as someone that's there, because being a superintendent is a really tough gig. When you're actually of older years, and so just helping Tom get up on his feet, and he doesn't even need that help. He's doing famously. Yeah, couldn't be happier.
I think it's pretty impressive that he's got the courage to keep making some improvements to some of those mowing lines. Obviously, talking with you, Leo, but still, he's in the hot seat, right? And
yeah.
Some of the stuff he's doing out there, I was there a couple of months ago, as you know, and just extending some green complexes slightly on the 18th and on the 15th, on the 7th, as I mentioned before. I think that's like hugely additive to the course, and it's brilliant that he's got the courage to do that.
And look, at the end of the day, it's kind of it's poor man's construction, right? Like it doesn't cost you anything to actually add a little bit more kind of strategic value into a hole, and who knows? I mean, I suspect which happens is that the mowing lines have probably come in over the years, and you just constantly kind of you've got to be aware of that and push them back out where you can, even if it's a couple of mil a week. That kind of adds up to a couple of feet over a period of time. So that's been going on for the last 5 years, and I'm sure it will continue, where you can utilize these little bumps and slopes and things. Goldie, I don't know when the last time you were there, but if you saw the first hole, he's run the green up the back of the up the back of the little humps, and then all of a sudden you got a little backstop that comes into play, so you can push a pin right back there, and you can kind of see some cool stuff happen, right? If you're an 18 handicapper, you can't spin the ball. Well, maybe you can utilize that little slope at the back. So he's done a little bit of that, yeah.
Do you think that having these new designs, like obviously we've been lucky to have these courses designed at Te Arai and Taraiti, and the green complexes are so bold compared to what we're used to in New Zealand. Do you think that's kind of having an impact through to places like Paraparaumu and how these green contours are being thought through?
Look, I hope so, because even a lot of these concepts that we've talked today, and we're relating them back to Paraparaumu Beach. And in my current role, I get to go around a lot of golf courses now, right? Like, particularly in the lower North Island, and there's a lot of wonderful land and a lot of wonderful golf sitting in some of these places, but they're sitting under trees, or they're sitting under or they're sitting against the backdrop of a beautification project at the back of a green that someone is obviously pretty clearly proud of, but it's just clutter. It just takes away, and there's intrinsic interest in every golf course. And I think it was when I interviewed Tom Doak at the Whole of Golf conference a couple of years ago. I said, leaving the bulldozer on the back of the back of the truck, what is the one thing? Because the room was full of superintendents from modest golf courses and like everything, from country courses to metropolitan courses. And he just said tree removal. He said just put width back into your golf courses, and I'd challenge committees and golf clubs and people listen to this pod just to open your eyes a little bit and see what's happening at some of these supposedly better places, and just take those principles and apply them in your own situation. You'd be amazed at what you could create with mowing lines, removal of clutter, and taking out some trees that have just grown in too tight.
And I think that it definitely is, the penny is slowly dropping. I think I saw some imagery at like Martin Golf Club, like they're starting to take a whole bunch of trees out, which is cool.
Yeah, I was there the other day. It's very good.
That's always been famous for sitting on really awesome land. I know some of the courses down on the west coast of the South Island. I think it's Westport Golf Club is notorious as well for, again, really great land and just trying to open that back up. So I think that hopefully it is starting to filter through all levels of course maintenance and some of these decision making for even our more modest country like courses, which is great because our land here is so good.
Yeah, I mean, look, last week I was up at Waitara Golf Club. I mean, absolutely amazing. If anyone's listening on here that hasn't been to Waitara, it is stunning. It's got holes that are literally hanging on to the coast. 6 par 3s, 1 par 5. So much fun, and they operate off voluntary greenkeepers. It's really, really impressive. There is so much stuff out there that some of these clubs don't even appreciate what they're sitting on. But
hey, Leo, before we finish, do you want to just tell us what you guys were doing at Waitara? Because it's a pretty cool story.
So this was an initiative by Brian Palmer at Tariti, the director of courses up there at Tariti and TRI. He wanted to put back in to New Zealand golf, New Zealand golf course, and he's done it at a few places quite quietly, and he probably wouldn't even like me mentioning this, but I think it's worth mentioning because he donated 2 coring machines, 3 staff. PGG Rights and Turf, who I work for, donated the product, the seed, the soil amendments, and some labour. And we got in there with about 20 volunteers from the Waitara Golf Club, and we cored, applied soil amendments, sand, fertilizer, and seed. And it was a really great kind of project to be involved in, and yeah, I mean, wonderful. Brian Palmer kind of had the had the initiative, and Ryan Blackburn, who's at a neighbouring golf club up there, and is a young fella going going places quickly. He managed it all on the ground, so no, it was great to be involved with.
Oh, yeah. Golf in New Zealand's lucky to have leaders like you guys, you and Brian, and what you've done out there is awesome.
It was a real fantastic story to see in the last week. Sensational.
Hey, well, Leo, you've been an amazing first guest, buddy, and
Thanks very much.
It's been a pleasure to chat to you about the beach, and hopefully everybody that's listening at home can get out there and see what we're so excited about.
Well, it's a place that's very special to me. I guess we kind of kicked off, what makes it so special in New Zealand golf, but in terms of, for me personally, it was just such a big part of my life, and it was just so wonderful to be involved in it, and thanks for allowing me the opportunity, just over a year since I left there, to kind of almost come back and have some therapy. So, Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Michael.